So very much welcome to the hybrid format, to both the live version and the online version of this seminar today with an IAS visiting fellow, Ellen Chipango from Johannesburg University, who is visiting us for a period of time and will be available for conversation and dialogue, stationed in geography up until the 18th. So please, if you are also interested in meeting Ellen and you're not getting a chance to do that today, there is an opportunity to do that, and we are delighted to be welcoming her. This is a particularly interesting dialogue for the IAS because we are very, very keen to think very seriously about practical changes in relation to the research collaborations and the international collaborations that we sponsor here through the IAS. And the work that Long Sang is doing with Ellen over the course of the period of the fellowship is really very much about thinking through these sorts of issues and asking questions about how we can begin to both have interdisciplinary and international collaborations that will lead to some serious practical changes in the way in which we approach understanding development, understanding dialogue, and understanding climate activism and environmental activism around the world. So this is a very significant kind of collaboration that we are very pleased to be able to help to foster in some way. We are also very delighted to be welcoming a scholar who is going to bring some real perspectives from the global south to us, and particularly, and I have to say from my own perspective too, to really think differently about questions to do with the way in which transnational feminisms might actually be able to become more operative in serious questions around development in the world. And so I'm totally thrilled to be welcoming Ellen, and we are very, very happy to be hosting her here today at the IAS. I'm going to turn now to my colleague Long Sang, who is going to do an introduction that is much more particular about their project. Long Sang.
Great. My name is Long Sang To. I'm one of the directors at the Steer Center, which is hosting Ellen for this 2-week period here at Loughborough University. This conversation is really timely because we're sitting in the time that the COP27 is being held in Egypt, and through our collaboration and our conversation over the next couple of weeks, we hope to be able to make a contribution from our perspective to that conversation and to offer an alternative framework to some of those discussions there. Ellen is undertaking the really deep work to transform the narrative around energy access and climate change. There's a lot of critiques around, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals and the climate agreements and so forth. But I don't see many people proposing innovative new frameworks of how we should go about doing it. And so I'm especially excited to be hosting Ellen and to start this collaboration with the University of Johannesburg, especially their trilateral chair in transformative innovation, fourth industrial revolution, and sustainable development. So welcome, Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for such a very kind introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Ellen Chipango. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow. I'm affiliated with the Trilateral Chair in Transformative Innovation, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and Sustainable Development at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. So today, my talk is titled Feminist Political Ecology and Ubuntu of Energy Poverty Towards a Synthesis. So let's get straight into it. To begin with, what is the problem? What is the rationale that pushed me to look into this? It has become commonplace in Zimbabwe to view and to identify women as a vulnerable population in the face of energy poverty because of the price that they pay in sourcing energy sources, as well as the inefficient stoves that they use. With the commitment to realizing Sustainable Development Goal number 7, green alternatives have been touted as a panacea. And as a result, focus has been on women's practical needs. Women are using inefficient cook stoves, as I have already indicated. They are traveling long distances in order for them to procure fuel wood. So, for example, the Minister of Energy and Power Development in Zimbabwe has observed that to expedite rural electrification will resolve this problem. UNICEF 2022 has indicated that 500,000 women and children in Zimbabwe are likely to benefit from these renewable energy technologies, especially in the health space, in the health sector. What is more, even policymakers informed by smart economics, they believe that investing in women and girls will help to abate energy poverty in the long run. The focus is on the practical needs of women and not necessarily their strategic needs and goals. The focus is on improving the situation of women, but that is where the problem lies. While this gender techno nexus seems compelling, it has its limitations. The major limitation is it is individualist because the focus is on this vulnerable woman or this vulnerable girl. It has been observed decades ago by Harari that focusing on women only is ignoring the dynamics that have caused this the marginalization of women in the first place. And it is for that reason that I'm not really persuaded by this techno-gender nexus approach. Because the focus has been on improving the needs, the utility, what women can benefit from these technologies, as well as trying to meet a minimal acceptable life. There lies the challenge. We are told much about what these technologies can do, but we know little about the vulnerabilities that can emanate from these renewable energy technologies. Neither do we know the relationships that can hinder or promote access to these energy technologies. It is for that reason that I take a critical stance and draw on feminist political ecology. Feminist political ecology appreciates the fact that there are various variables that can intersect with gender in creating inequalities. Yes, gender does not present itself in a pure form, and we lose no points on accepting that there are other variables that influence gender in creating inequalities. For example, class, capabilities, etc. So drawing upon the intersectionality approach of feminist political ecology, we are able to disrupt the hegemonic ontology of placing energy poverty outside of context, be it political, economic, or cultural. However, could feminist political ecology suffice? I am pessimistic for two main reasons. Intersectional relationality is not enough. The first reason is that, yes, in as much as we appreciate the fact that gender intersects with other factors in creating inequalities, but social order cannot be defined by intersectionalities only, because we need to ask ourselves whether these members are able to, in this order, are they able to care for others, and care about others? I am of the view that intersectionality for its own sake is only a means and is not being pursued for its own sake. That is an ethical struggle. Also, it appears feminist political ecology, it advances the view that for capabilities to be realized, one needs to be in a relationship. This relationship of intersectionality, of taking cognizance of other factors, but more often than not, that is pursued only as a means and not for its own sake. And by the end of the day, feminist political ecology, in my view, is individualist. So, what could be the alternative? I am of the view that Ubuntu could be a foundational value. I am not discrediting feminist political ecology, but I am saying Ubuntu could play a role as a foundational value. What is Ubuntu? Roughly, it means human excellence in Southern Africa. It features in maxims such as, I am because we are, therefore I am. A person is a person through other persons. The late Archbishop Desmond Tutu observed that a complete sufficient human being would be subhuman. This means community comes first before an individual. Put another way, an individual exists through community. By emphasizing community as African, I am by no means trying to say it is a feature of those on the African continent only. No. Because even on the African continent, one may find individualist African thinkers. And also, not on the African continent, you may find others who place community at the center of their lives. So by African, I mean that it is a value that is silent, a salient value among Black culture on the African continent, more than elsewhere. According to Mugumbate and Nyanguru 2013, Ubuntu is Africa's greatest contribution to the world. So, why focusing on Ubuntu? Is it for the sake of communitarianism? No. It's not necessarily about communitarianism as in other forms of communitarianism, but it is about the propriety of the relationships. And in this regard, I'm drawing on Teddy Smith's 2017 interpretations, understanding of Ubuntu. So there are two distinctive relationships of Ubuntu. Identity, which is a sense of belonging. One talks much of we than I. A sense of togetherness, coordination, and cohesion. Then another form of relationship is solidarity. Care for quality of life, helping others to improve their situation, to improve their quality of life. From this line of reasoning, solidarity, it means independence from an Ubuntu perspective. It means interdependence. One cannot be independent on their own. For them to be independent, they have to be interdependent with others. One may ask, why now? Why focusing on Ubuntu now? There are two main reasons why I'm drawing on Ubuntu. The first one is I'm heeding a call by Professor Benjamin Sovaku and colleagues who observed in 2016 that scholars of energy research and even policymakers, they approach energy issues as if they are existing in a vacuum, in a moral vacuum. Second, there's a need to decolonize the research on energy and on energy issues. By decolonizing, I do not mean to ignore the so-called Western philosophies. Rather, I am arguing for an ecology of knowledge, coexistence of these philosophies. I argue the case that through Ubuntu, feminist political ecology could draw about 7 lessons. As I have already indicated, that I believe in feminism through Ubuntu. The first one, sense of belonging, not about vulnerability, but connection and responsibility. This is about mutual responsibility, not necessarily focusing on women because they are vulnerable, because they travel long distances looking for fuel wood, because they use inefficient stoves, but mutual responsibilities between the service providers, the government, and the vulnerable, where policies that do not cater for those in need are also wrong. There's also a need to transcend intersectionality, as I have already indicated earlier. There's a great difference between protecting a society and interacting in pro-social ways. There's a great difference in supporting a community and entering into a communion. Suffice to say, identity, belonging, a sense of belonging, of togetherness and coordination must be prized for its own sake. Addressing power dynamics should be in a relational way for us to address the issue of asymmetrical gender relations, whereby the humanness, the humanity of the elite here, I mean the government, the service providers, is also at stake if they do not deliver. Justice as recognition for women. Women's voice must be heard and, more importantly, respected. Participate for the sake of justice. Participation must be prized, not necessarily because of the epistemic consequences, but because it is the right thing to do. We participate in our creations. We are because you are, and since you are, definitely I am. As 2010 observed that. Also, there's need to transcend individual development. I am of the view that focusing on feminist political ecology alone, focusing on this vulnerable woman or vulnerable girl isn't enough. If we are not cautious, we will fall for neoliberalism unawares. How does that happen? It happens through responsibilization. We're saying these women must embrace renewable energy technologies, self-care, look after themselves. Where is mutual responsibility in that? I move on to methodology as I'm focusing on a particular case study in Zimbabwe. I'm focusing on the Zingondi resettlement area in the southeastern Manicaland province of Zimbabwe. I conducted qualitative research. my research proceeded in 2 stages. I first conducted interviews between 2016 and early 2017. And then I made up follow-up interviews in 2010. And I interviewed residents from the community and also the elite. By the elite, I mean the government actors, NGOs, consultants, etc. I also reviewed policies and newspapers. Thematic analysis was conducted. So what did they say? Empirical evidence from the Zimbabwe settlement area shows that, yes, gender intersects with other factors. Renewable energy technologies leading to centralization of power at household level. How does that happen? In the Zimbabwe settlement area, it emerged that the most popular form of renewable energy technology being used is solar. And this comes in form of small solar panels and solar lanterns. However, the majority of the respondents lamented poor quality of these appliances. And for most of the women, they indicated that resulted in centralization of power at a household level. How does that happen? That is when men, because they have the technical skills, they seem to control how these gadgets are being used in the home. Poor quality of solar lanterns, the concern is gendered. Women were the ones who were most concerned about this. Why? Mainly because of gender primitive accumulation. Zimbabwe is a patriarchal society. Even though women are the ones who labor in fields, which are their banks, that is where they get their livelihood. By the end of the day, the male figures, I mean the husbands, are the heads of the household. So for these women to go back to the market to buy replacements, they have to go through the household head. Therefore, the market has sold them to patriarchy, and at the same time, they're keeping on feeding the market, buying one and the same thing. So it's consequential for women. It is for that reason that the majority of women felt that before we talk about energy transition, we need to start by looking at the structural system. It's not only an issue of transitioning from one source of energy to another. This has to be done in a logical way. Otherwise, we'll keep on going in cycles. Emotions of energy poverty. Asked about their experiences, how they felt about being energy poor. Women were they were emotional about this because they felt that because of their gender roles, what they are expected of, it was shameful, it was humiliating. not to be able to deliver. And this speaks to my own work that I published in the Journal of Human Development and Capabilities in 2021 in an article titled Beyond Utilitarian Economics, a Capability Approach to Energy Poverty and Social Suffering. In that paper, I argued the case that we shouldn't, policymakers and even researchers, we shouldn't be only focused on economic issues and ignore these non-economic issues. They do really matter. But on the issue of emotions, hold on, I'll get back on this issue a bit later. An Ubuntu of energy poverty and experience. I quote, "The problem is that government and NGOs are playing far away from the people. They are not part of us. How would they know about the reality? Being far from us results in them not knowing what our real problems are. Lack of freedom to relate precedes lack of access to clean energy. As I have already indicated, there's need for mutual responsibility, care for and care about one another. Lack of freedom to relate precedes lack of clean energy. For this resident and those in his community, the problem here is they are failing to relate with the government and the service providers. For them, it is the biggest issue before they talk about a lack of clean energy. It's another form of marginalization. Lack of identity, injustice as misrecognition and disrespect. How can then the voice of women be heard if there is no coordination? Ubuntu as identity, that relationship that I spoke about earlier of identifying, belonging to this group. How can it be known what form of energy women would prefer, or what is suitable under their circumstances? Now I get back to the issue of emotions. This finding emerged after I had asked the question, what were their expectations from the government, the service providers, NGOs, etc.? The response in their responses, they indicated issues to do with trust, empathy. In other words, emotions with solidarity are a launchpad for transformation. Why they, after probing, why they insisted on empathy, on trust. They felt that by accessing energy, it wasn't necessarily going to solve their economic challenges, be it cooking, be it heating the house, but it was going to give them dignity. Giving them dignity in the context of Ubuntu would mean that they would be able to do what they are expected of, and being able to help other people, not necessarily as individuals. In other words, this community is moving from an individualist type of development to an interdependent type of development. Gender equality obtains through a sense of belonging. Relations before transition asked whether they were prepared to leave the old sources of energy that they are currently using. Will the grid reach us? If it does, would there be no load shedding? Can ZESA be trusted? For these reasons, that is why we say fuel wood is reliable. For me, it was a shocking finding, because more often than not, it is believed that people use fuel wood because of affordability issues, and relationships involved are seldom mentioned. But this community is raising these concerns. ZESA, it stands for the Zimbabwe Electricity Supply Authority, the power utility. So they are asking about the relationship between the community and those who are supposed to provide the service, the duty bearer. So by the end of the day, sustainability is not only of resources, but also of relationships. Transition is not based on material resources, but moral and ethical issues. Breakdown in Ubuntu: government, NGOs, and investors. This emerged from the interviews that I conducted with the elite, I mean the government, the NGOs, and one participant from the power utility observed that if you apply for electricity, we give you, that is if you meet the requirements and you afford it. Here the power utility is for independence and not interdependence. There's no mutual responsibility to care. Rather, there is privileged irresponsibility because they're inclined to neoliberal and to liberal policies, where the citizens are taken as customers. Responsibilization through renewable energy technologies. I sought to understand the ideology behind the ideology behind the adoption of renewable energy technologies. What was the drive behind NGOs, the government, to motivate people to embrace these as an alternative. One NGO observed, we are driving renewable energy agenda, working with government, which is a good strategy, because no matter how the government fails to deliver, people will always have confidence in it because they feel it's their protector. Similarly, another NGO observed, NGOs are trying to create demand by educating people about renewable energy technologies. Here, what is happening, government is subscribing to neoliberal freedom, as well as the NGOs, individualism, responsibilization, people taking care of themselves. But by the end of the day, because of women's social standing in society, they are the hardest hits. As I have already indicated, renewable energy technologies have become a tool of gender primitive accumulation. And this responsibilization shows how the government has failed to relate. Post-COVID, more need for Ubuntu. So it was tough before, but with what COVID has done to our livelihood, it's tougher. What about women who have never been like us men in terms of economic power? This finding speaks to the need to transform from an individualist type of development to an interdependent one, where the needs of women are also taken care of, not for them to be left out dealing with the harsh neoliberal tendencies out there. This should be done not only to make women better off, but to make them a better people as well. So why does it matter? So what? Of all what I have said, why does it matter? I strongly believe it matters, especially for those who are sympathetic to a shift from subjective and individual towards a more objective and relational approach to energy poverty. It is time we moved from focusing on the empirical, from the empirical evidence of feminist political ecology's intersectionalities to ethical and moral approaches espoused by Ubuntu. Policy implications. Free markets fail to provide energy to everyone, and therefore they are unethical. The same applies to commercialization. If it makes energy access unaffordable and inaccessible, then it is unethical. Planning in third world must include trust, sustainable development, sustainable relationships with the state and service providers. While feminist political ecology offers a way past the police approach that burden the already burdened and empowered women, Ubuntu brings humanity to police, where the humanness of the elite is also at stake, not only focusing on the vulnerable. Through Ubuntu, if one helps others access energy, one is a better person or living better. SDG 7. Is it an Ubuntu policy? I argue the case that, and I strongly do that, SDG 7 cannot be faulted for targeting to substantially increase renewable energy share in the global energy mix. Neither can SDG 7 be faulted for targeting to double in efficiency improvement. However, I think what is a fair criticism is that SDG 7 is just too individualist, because it appears the focus is on improving the capability of individuals to access energy, clean energy. However, as I have already argued, that can only happen under ideal conditions characterized by relationships such as identity and solidarity, as espoused by the Ubuntu African ethic. Thank you.